Hi everyone, this is Ismael again with another episode of Art Can Change the World. And today I was thinking a lot about what it takes to be an art teacher today and what are kind of the steps to get to becoming an art teacher. And I started writing, taking some notes down and seriously thinking about it. And of course I'm thinking of my own journey, but I'm also thinking of other people who may have similar interests, want to be art teachers, are thinking of art teaching as a lifelong profession. And what does that entail? What steps do you need to take? Well, the first step, and I took some notes, so if I look down, it's not because, or look to the side, it's not because I'm not paying attention to you, but just so I could remember some of the particular finer points of what I want to discuss today is that one, you should have a passion for art. I think that's the best place to start. If you're going to teach art, you should be either practicing it, meaning that either you're drawing or painting on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be literally every day, but it's a good practice to be doing art on a consistent basis. If you are a lover of art and you're thinking of how can I incorporate art more seriously in my life, how can I make it a part of my living, you know, you have that kind of passion that you want art really to be a part of what you do, then, you know, becoming an art teacher is definitely a very good option, you know. So what is the process? Well, if you're coming out of high school and you've been doing art, let's say you've had a decent education in art, you know, from elementary, middle school into high school, and maybe you're inspired by one of your art teachers and you know, of course you're thinking of a career, what am I going to do in college, or if I'm going to college, what am I going to study? So around the country, there's, in most, I would say in almost every state, there are colleges that offer art education programs or what they call visual arts education programs, which are geared to training people to becoming art teachers and all the intricacies of that. In a later episode we'll talk about all the different kinds of programs there are out there, but for now you need to just find a program, and usually college, because you need a degree in most cases. I don't want to say it in every case. In some cases colleges also offer a certificate in art education. I have a number of friends who went back to school not because they needed a degree. They were already teachers teaching art, but they needed a specific certificate in the sense of that they are trained in art education. And most schools that have a degree program also have a non-degree program, so at the end you get a certificate, not a degree specifically. I think it usually ranges from how many credits you get compared to the, you know, let's say a full BA degree in the arts, in art education. That's one avenue, right? But let's say you're an older person and you're thinking of a change in your life and in your career, and either you were a teacher or are a teacher in a different subject, or you're someone who has been involved in education. Maybe you have a degree in education in a different field, and you want to do you want to get into art education, you want to teach art in the classroom, then the same would apply. You'd have to find a program. Now the difference between a high school student and let's say someone who already has, let's say a bachelor's or a master's already in one field of education, is that you would need to, in most cases, not in every case now, but in most cases you would have to get a degree, a master's degree in the field of art education or visual arts education. Now, I'm looking down at my notes a little bit here just to figure out some of the things that people would think about or need to think about. And usually a good degree program, if you're starting out with a bachelor's, you know, you have to do your 4 years. If you're doing a master's program, it's usually 2 to 3 years. I know in the state of New York where I live, they usually give you about 7 years to complete a program. Let's say if you're working and you can't always, let's say you have an erratic schedule, you still want to get your degree, but you need to take it at a slower pace. It usually takes about 7 years within that time so that you can qualify for a master's degree in art education. I think it may be similar to a bachelor's, but I'm not sure on that. Of course, comment below if you have any ideas and if you know. The other factor is, so you find a program, let's say, and you enroll in a college education program, and you're going to study art education. So what is that going to be like? Well, in most cases, you're going to study theory. You're going to study, if it's a decent program, you'll learn about the history of art education, which is really important. I think a lot of people don't realize that art education has a specific history, has a real, you know, most people take for granted that art education started with the academics, you know, math, science, social studies. But when it comes to actual academic school setting, we have to go back to probably the 19th century to really see how art was incorporated into the basic school setting with the other disciplines that we are so familiar with when we think of school, right? When we think of public school or even charter schools, right? So that's one. So having a program that at least gives you good history, that's important. So you're going to learn that. You're going to learn, you know, a lot about psychology too. You know, children are unique. They're special. They're wonderful. But they're very different in the various stages of their development. So kids in elementary school are very different from kids in middle school, and they're very different from kids in high school. But what you're going to find and you're going to see is that kids are also different depending on their grades. For instance, if you're thinking of middle school, a 6th grade student coming in is still kind of like in the level of a 5th grader. But once they get to 7th grade, they're beginning to change, and you're going to see it. You may see it physically. A lot of kids go through these summer growth sparks, you know. Also down when you look at 8th grade students, they're taller, they're bigger, their voices have gotten deeper, you know. All that puberty starts kicking in. They're still kids, you know, in middle school, for instance, kids range usually from 11, I would say 10 to 11, to 13 to 14 years old, right? And usually kids graduate usually about 13 years old and go into high school. So they're in their teens by the time they enter high school. Now that could be varied, and I don't want to say that that's a science in terms of that, but that's the basic sense of what we know today, right? So you're going to learn that. You're also going to take studio classes. Now, to me, studio classes were the best part, because studio classes were classes where you had a chance to work on your art in hopes that whatever you're learning, you can eventually adapt it to a classroom. So for instance, you know, you could take up painting, printmaking, sculpting, drawing. You know, those are the 4 major, you know, also art history for some who are interested. Now, again, I need to say this, it depends on the program that you're in. Some programs may offer studio courses, some may not, and that's a possibility. So really look into the kind of program you're on. I'm not saying that you have to take studio classes. If you're already versed in the various different types of disciplines in art, if you know a little bit about printmaking, you know something about painting, you know something about sculpting, and that's good. I mean, I personally like the fact that when I did my degree, I went to and took studio courses, and you have a chance to kind of, those classes are kind of fun because you really do get a chance to not only get a new perspective on a medium that maybe you didn't think about teaching, but then you also meet wonderful people, a professor that's passionate about the subject, as well as colleagues who are either MFA, which are Master of Fine Arts, students who are looking to be full-time artists, with MAs who are people like me who want to teach in the public schools or in that manner. So that's one way to look at it, and that's another aspect of the training and the development you'll have as an art teacher when it comes to school. Now, in those years that you're in college, I think it's vital to understand that you need to develop relationships. Most people don't think about going to college to develop relationships. We go there to get an education, get a degree, and go to work afterwards, right? But colleges and universities are a wonderful place to also think outside the box. This is challenging at best sometimes, especially if you're in a classroom where the professor may be very rigid about whatever the subject may be, and there isn't a lot of latitude and space. But that doesn't change you for being an individual and making certain choices. I made a very serious choice, which was I wanted to develop relationships as well as an education in the field of art. Why? Why is that important? You're going to find that throughout your career, regardless if you go into art education seriously or not, that it's all about people. You're going to be working with kids, right? You're going to be working with little people, but you're going to be working with people. And that means they have something to offer as much as you do. A good art teacher is not just someone who knows the subject, but also knows how to facilitate and also learn. Because I've been into class, when I've done observations and I've gone into classrooms, I find myself learning as much as the student is. And it's always wonderful to have a conversation with a student and see that they really get it. And sometimes I'll look at a piece of art and I may not understand what they did, or I'm looking at a specific way they did shading, or a way they built a particular sculpture, and wonder, well, I wonder how they figured out how to do that, And of course, I'll always ask the teacher how they went about the lesson. But what I find so interesting is when a student is able to articulate those things, maybe not always so clearly, but still you can see that the student really loves what they're doing, has a real insight to what they're doing, and are willing to share that, So that's always a wonderful thing. So that's another. So relationships are important. So who would you create relationships with? Well, first of all, your classmates and your colleagues. I usually call them colleagues because that's what they eventually will become. They're going to become fellow art teachers. Some of them, I've met art teachers that are extremely gifted in the arts, meaning that they really were, before they even thought of art education, they were really artists as far as their technique, their development. Even though I've been in the arts all my life, I never had the formal training that a lot of my friends have. And it is amazing to meet people that, they are really gifted in their skills, and I don't want to use that word too much, gifted, because a good artist trains and develops constantly. So it only inspired me to train harder and to develop my own skill as an artist. And that's really important. That's another point that I want to discuss also. You should really be working on your art. You're always going to bump into people, and believe it or not, there will be professors that will tell you this too, that if you're getting into the field of art education, chances are you can't really do your art because, well, you'll be studying. You'll be, you know, working on your development. So that means you got to be reading books and writing papers and all this academic stuff so that you could teach art. You'll be learning about lesson plans. You'll be learning about how to do a unit, which will incorporate many lesson plans, and so on and so forth, right? So when will you have time to do your art? My answer to that is you always have time to make art. If you could take out 10 or 20 minutes a day, take out your sketch pad, sketch an idea. Sketch what's in front of you. You know, I learned a wonderful technique which I'll teach in a later video called sketch collage, where just different things I see in a room, I'll start sketching. You know, always working on ideas for a project. I give myself projects to do. My last project I did a portrait for my mother, so for Christmas, and it took me a while to do, but it kept me going back and honing my skills as an artist. Also discussed the fact that you should be getting some formal training if you're someone who still feels that they need to develop more. I'm always a constant student, meaning that I feel that I need to be learning. So I try to connect myself. Right now I live in New York, so a wonderful place to study is the Art Students League in New York City. There are other places, but that's the place I chose, and I love it. I love it there. I think it's just, when you go in there, it's all about art, you know, and all its different various disciplines, and wonderful people who are just passionate from all ages, you know, from very young to very old. We all love it, and we all go there to practice and develop. So that's an idea that you can keep in your mind about what you should be doing, as well as working on your degree, right? Always have a practice. Another important thing is, and even though most professors will touch on it, is get connected with organizations that are leading the way in art education. One of the largest organizations that I know of, that I feel that every art teacher, I don't care who you are and I don't care how busy you think you are, you should be connected to this organization. That is the National Art Educators Association. They are a national organization that encourages, sponsors, helps art teachers around the country. So if you live in the continental United States, you should be connected with them. They're just an amazing organization, a ton of resources. If you subscribe, you also get their journal, which is, I have to tell you, very sophisticated stuff, and great articles. You also get a chance to see what other art teachers are doing around the country, and some people are doing just some amazing stuff. Now, some of it could be very cerebral, very deep, you know. Some of the other stuff is very light, but you know, you choose what works for you. But I think it's so important because it allows you to be an educated art teacher. And an educated art teacher is someone who, you know, tries to stay connected to what's going on in the field of art education, and how and what are people doing that are innovative ideas. What are some of the new techniques out there? What are ways to engage students? So organizations like the NAEA really work with that. Now, that being said, if let's say you're watching this video and you're from another state, I'm from New York, so I know the local organizations. They're also underneath national. There's local organizations, state organizations in art. So for me, it would be you know, something like the NYSATA, right? The New York State Art Teachers Association. Citywide, it would be NACADA, which is the New York City Art Teachers Association. So you see, I believe in getting connected to all these organizations. As far as, you know, you pay your dues yearly, whatever you got to do. You go to their workshops. You try to get credits for your PD, because you're going to need professional development, and all of that is going to help you early. And if you do it while you're in school, and you're not committed to teaching at this point, but you're just learning, that's a good place to start. I started that way, and it really did help me really see what's going out there. It really inspired me too, because when I went to the annual workshops that my city organization offered, it really helped me connect with people. I made lifelong friends, as I'm concerned with. Sorry. Anyway, I made great friends in that way, So people that I admire and respect, and people who are very seasoned in teaching art. So I think it's really important that you get a chance to do that and, get connected. Now, another important aspect is collect resources. Collect as much as you can. And I'm being very honest. And I know, I drive my wife crazy about books in the house because I have a ton of them. But it's important that you find out what's out there and what's good. A lot of books you'll probably end up starting out collecting will be from your training in college and university. But look, there's stuff that's out there that's really good. Now you got to be careful. There's a lot of junk. Like every field, there's always good and bad in terms of literature, material, resources, and stuff like that. But most of the time, it'll be easy to spot the good stuff. And I tell people, just talk to other senior teachers, talk to other senior or people in the field of art education that know their stuff. They will connect you with the right literature, articles, books, websites that will in turn help you become a better teacher. And there's never enough, to be honest with you. If you're going to be any good, there's never enough to learn. There's always something to learn. Teachers that say that they kind of know it all and they don't really need to go to a professional development, even though it's required, don't really know what they're talking about. All the best teachers that I know are always developing, always learning, always teaching, and teaching fellow art teachers. So I highly, highly recommend you read. And I'm going to do an episode, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, about some of the books that I have found that have been extremely helpful in my development as an art teacher. Now, another very important part of any aspect of art education is for the art teacher, not the student, the art teacher. You should be going to museums, galleries, anywhere there's art. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be modern, contemporary, traditional. I think it's important to always be learning, and the best way to learn is to go see some great paintings, sculptures. There's some amazing people who do amazing work with printmaking, mixed media, anything that deals with art. So I had to learn, I'll give you a good example, I had to learn the beauty of contemporary art. I'm really a traditionalist. I feel, get those basic skills. You should know how to draw. I'm that kind of teacher where, you got to get the fundamentals right. But I started, going to contemporary and conceptual galleries of art. And I surprised myself because I found some really interesting stuff that enlightened me, to help me to kind of see art in a broader sense. Now, that doesn't mean I can incorporate every idea that I see in a gallery or in a museum into my classroom, but it does help me in conversation and having a discourse. Now, if you're a high school teacher specifically, that will, the whole idea of ideas, because that's what a lot of conceptual art is really based on, is the idea. You have a lot there that you can have some serious discussions about identity, about culture, about language, perspectives, on certain issues, I personally find it really interesting that when an art teacher doesn't participate in going to a museum and in a gallery or anything like that, doesn't have a regular habit of monthly, even if it's once a month, going somewhere specifically to see a show, an exhibit, whatever, how lacking they are in dialogue. Teachers get, it's easy to get caught up in a box and think, well, this is the only way, and I have these group of kids, and this is all they can learn. I've seen teachers do that. I've seen teachers that will not stretch the envelope because they have already made up in their mind that their kids fit in this box. The reality is they don't. We're not boxes. Kids are not boxes. Kids are expressive, have personality, have identity, have they come from a variety of cultures and languages. So we shouldn't be treating kids like they fit in a box. No, they don't. So if we're not going to treat ourselves that way, why are we doing that to our kids? So that's a question we need to always ask ourselves about. Another point that I want to touch on is recording through pictures, artwork, student artwork specifically. Now, when I go to a museum, when I go to a gallery, I usually carry my cell phone, and I have a pretty decent camera on my phone. So I take pictures. If it's not a problem, usually in a gallery, as long as you don't, or in a museum, if you don't take flash if you don't have a flash, you could usually take pictures in any museum. In some museums or galleries, they may have restrictions, and that's understandable. And if you can't take pictures, try, if you can, buy the catalog. Usually, a good museum usually will have a catalog of the photos of the artwork, so you don't have to take a picture. You can get the book, and usually the book will come with even more information, and that's great as a resource to you, the art teacher. But now, talking about art, the student artwork, I think it's important if you already work in a school and the art teacher there, maybe you're not the art teacher, someone else is, or if you are the art teacher, you should be taking pictures of your work, of the student work. If you go to a student art show, no matter what grade it is, elementary, middle school, high school, I take pictures of all artwork. I don't care what grade the students are, because in many cases you'll find work that's going to blow your mind. Some kids are just, will surprise you. And what's great about student artwork is that we always take for granted that we assume that, again, you have to be gifted or if you have to be talented to do art. And that really is a really bad way to approach children with art, because then they get the notion that, well, you have to have a special gift or you have to be really good already. And most kids, when they first pick up a pencil or a crayon pot or a brush, don't know even something as simple as what is a line, how to shade, or how to create a three-dimensional design on a two-dimensional space, how to deal with sculpting, ceramics. It doesn't matter. Kids will always come, and you need to approach it this way, as not knowing exactly where to start. Now, there may be some students, yes, that have a natural capacity, let's say, to do art. But even people like, when Picasso was little, he was already considered a genius, right? But guess what? Picasso still went to school, because it's not just having a capacity. You still need to learn. So approach every student with the possibility that they're going to learn something new. Even if they're already good at it, doesn't matter. Give every child the chance to learn art. And the ones that you think aren't that good may really surprise you. I've seen this many, many times, where students who may struggle in other subjects do beautifully in art, because for some reason they have found their voice there. And art has become really a place where they're able to be more who they are. And that's the beauty of art. You know, you can't do that necessarily in math, science, and social studies. Not to knock those, or those particular disciplines. I know writing, especially with English, there's, when I'm thinking of poetry and creative writing, yeah, you can express yourself, but some kids are not good writers either. So I try to always look at it that way. Yeah, maybe you may have to challenge those students who are more, let's say, talented in art than the ones that aren't. But it's important to treat everybody fairly, and to be a teacher that does not pick and choose who are your best students. Try to treat everyone the same, because like I said, you may be surprised at who excels more because they really worked hard on their project. Now, with that said, going back to how I started this point was, take pictures of everything. You will find yourself going back to that piece of artwork that you saw at some school, and coming up with a way to make that one of your lessons. And in that way, you can you have another something more to give to your kids and to your students. So I have hundreds and hundreds of photos. Everywhere I go where there's an art show, if I see a mural I like, it doesn't matter. I take a picture of it. Now, I can't say I can make an art project out of everything I've seen, because some of these art projects are just simply amazing. But what I end up doing is trying to get the name of the teacher and shooting them an email, or talking to them on Facebook. How did they do the lesson? In some cases, I may get an actual lesson plan, with pictures. In other cases, I'll just get a few lines, and it is what it is, right? Some art teachers are more forthcoming in sharing their lessons, others are not. And one episode we'll talk about that, but not this one. So let's go on. Another thing is, continue to be open-minded. Open-minded to the world of art first, and then the world of art education. Because art is what makes art education, right? Be picky too. I mean, there's some really good stuff out there, but there's stuff that doesn't really relate and may not relate to what you do. So like it or not, as a teacher, you still have to develop you have to develop a curriculum, you have to map out your year. So you need to have the kind of lessons that will engage students. So some things may be a little too abstract for your group of kids. Like, I wouldn't teach conceptual art to elementary students. They're not going to, in most cases, they really don't understand it. They may have fun with it, but you're not going to have much of an idea where to go. So I would do that more with high school. Now, if you have a difference of opinion, of course, share it and tell me why you would do it differently. But that's, in the comments below. But anyway, this is a long video, and that's my take for today. Please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. My hope is that this channel will develop further. It's my second episode, so it's still a little rough, but I'm hoping that that'll get better over time. Until then, Take care and see you next time, and please subscribe below. Thank you.